6:46 in Trinidad and Tobago, and as I say, we might not be able to fix any of the ills in our society, but we could sing about 50 songs about each one. We're really good at that. And we want to put the focus now on the World Day Against Child Labour, which will be observed on Sunday. It's the 12th of June, under the theme Universal Social Protection to End Child Labour. Well, according to the United Nations, this is aimed at bringing about increased investment in social protection systems and schemes to establish solid social protection and indeed the intention protection floors and to protect children from child labor. Locally, the Ministry of Labour is on an education drive reminding citizens of those rights in a bid to better safeguard this vulnerable group. Tomorrow, that's Friday, the ministry will roll out the Adult Child Labour Survey via their social media pages to spread some more awareness. Well, to give us some more context to the relevance of this entire observance, we're joined by Labour Inspector 2 at the Ministry of Labour, and he is Farouk Mohammed. Mr. Mohammed, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for taking the time this morning.
Wa alaikum assalam to you, and good morning to your viewers and your crew in studio.
Good to have you with us. So, you know, Mr. Mohammed, the obvious thing that comes to mind as I'm looking at some of the advanced material that was sent to us about children and so on, that it says here that 16 is the legal age for employment. But according to the United Nations, and I think we've adopted it, 18 still constitutes being a child. So how do you reconcile that? So if you have children who are over the age of 16 but under the age of 18, are you in violation of any law?
No, Trinidad and Tobago has declared 16 years as the minimum age. However, universally, the definition of a child is someone who is under the age of 18 years, of course.
So the UN can say that can say we practice child labor in Trinidad then?
No, so while persons can work from age 16 to 18, there are certain restrictions in terms of what type of jobs they can work in. For example, they cannot work in hazardous work, in jobs which might expose them to dangerous chemicals or machinery, for example. So more light work they can engage in. But you know, the June 12th every year gives countries an opportunity to raise awareness about child labor, because globally, the last estimates released by the ILO, the International Labour Organization, shows that there are 160 million children involved in child labor throughout the world. This represents 63 million girls and 97 million boys, which is really 1 in every 10 children around the world is involved in some degree of child labor. So therefore, there's a urgency really to highlight and address this issue.
And that is the more important point. I mean, not trying to trivialize the issue of 16 and 18, but just so we could understand better, Mr. Mohammed, when we talk about child labor, what do we define as child labor?
So child labor really is work that is mentally, physically, socially, and morally dangerous, harmful to children, and interferes with their education. So in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, and the age 16 is in line with the Ministry of Education, their legislation, and that children between the ages of 5 and 15, it's compulsory that they must be in school. So work really that affects their health, their welfare, it takes them away from their schooling. It exposes them to dangers. It doesn't allow them to opportunity to play, etc. Those are some of the issues. Now, not all work done by children there are some activities that are allowed for those under 16. For example, they may work in a family business with members of their family. They may work after school hours, earning pocket money, or during the vacation period. Once they are not exposed to any dangers or harsh conditions, those are acceptable.
And what is the monitoring process in Trinidad and Tobago? Because as you would have explained, there are obviously some gray areas. When does a child work in after school in the family business what depending on the nature of the work and so on, that might take a toll on them physically and so on. When does that become abusive? Likewise, giving children chores to do around the house that are mandatory and could be very oppressive in some way. When does that become something that requires investigation? So in trying to understand that, what monitoring process do we have in Trinidad and Tobago for that?
Yeah, so each case is looked at on its own merit. So persons might be engaged in chores, but let's say, for example, they may be helping out in the kitchen garden. So that's fine once it doesn't interfere with their school or their opportunity to play or their opportunity to do their homework, etc. Or it doesn't expose them to any dangerous chemicals that the parents may be using in spraying these plants in the garden. So those are some of the things. They're working in the family business. Once it's not long hours, it's taking away from their education. It's affecting their ability to concentrate in their class, etc. To do their homework. Then it becomes child labor. Those situations.
And as far as the occasion coming up, Sunday the 12th, the Universal Social Protection to End Child Labor is the theme for this year. We talked about an event that's coming up tomorrow to mark this period of awareness. Tell us a bit more about what is being done locally to mark the occasion.
Well, child labor is much more than a labor issue. It's also an education issue. It's a social issue. So we are partnering with the Ministry of Education to ensure that those children that we find in a labor situation are reintegrated back into the school environment. Also with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, we're looking to ensure that any support services needed by those children or their parents who may be vulnerable, we are able to refer them to those agencies for support. We have partnered with the Gender and Child Affairs Division of the Office of the Prime Minister, the Child Rights Ambassadors, to develop this survey that we are rolling out for adults as well as for primary and secondary school children. So this is expected to be launched shortly. And also we are looking to launch a success story from a former child laborer who found a way out of child labor through education, and he's now actually employed as an operations manager. So you all can look forward to that. Follow us on social media. The handle is @LaborGovTT. Also, you can call us at 2990300 option 3 for more information.
And because our society seems to be changing, not to a huge degree, but with the influx of migrants and so on, and many of them undocumented, and maybe concerns about exploitation, not just of the adults, is that a concern as well for the Ministry of Labour, of the exploitation of maybe children of those undocumented or documented migrants?
Yes, definitely, it's a concern. The exploitation of any child is a concern for us, and it doesn't exclude migrant children, or whether they are documented or undocumented. The laws of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to child labor protects them as well.
As we look at the overall landscape, Mr. Mohammed, as far as the environment with updated rules and regulations, are you satisfied with our level of monitoring? And by the way, before we conclude, we'll give the contact information for anyone who might want to report issues with they believe maybe of cases of child labor. But what is your own view on the overall environment as to the issues that might be very concerning about child labor in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, so while I believe it's not a bigger problem in Trinidad and Tobago as some other countries that we have seen, but it do exist, and we do have reports of children selling on the beach as well as selling on the highway, in car parks, in shopping malls, etc. And we are working to address those situations. But I think the pandemic has created a vulnerability with some families, and most likely some of those children who may not have been able to join online classes and may have fallen out of the system, and parents may have turned to them as a survival mechanism, really, to bring food, into bring additional income into the home, to provide food. So we are trying to address it, at a holistic manner.
And just on that point, you mentioned children selling on the beach. I mean, I see that whichever weekend I happen to go on the beach, you see children selling, whether it's fruits or vegetables or trinkets or so on. It's a Sunday or Saturday. Maybe it's not school time. Is that permitted, or is that a case of exploitation in some way?
Yeah, it is permitted if it's outside of school hours, but it could be a dangerous situation too if those children are unaccompanied by any adult. They may be exposed to dangers, to human trafficking, or because of their vulnerability, they may be exposed to exploitation by unscrupulous persons. So there are some degree of exploitation that can take place there.
But what should a citizen do in a situation like that, Mr. Mohammed? Because I mean, sometimes you might say, look, this is a child probably helping a family where things are difficult, and let me just try and assist. Or should I ask a question and say, well, why people might say, well, why asking if am I a child molester or something, asking a child too many questions and so on? How do you deal with a situation like that?
Yeah, it's everybody's responsibility, to address the issue of child labor. There are some cultural and social norms, but persons, if they are not sure, they can ask a question, or they can call the Ministry of Labor, the Labor Inspectorate unit, and of course, we would go in and investigate and determine, what aspects of child labor may exist. Yeah.
And before we conclude, and again, I'll give all the contact information before we finish our dialogue this morning and reach the top of the hour in just a couple of minutes' time. What is your final message to our audience this morning in relation to the observance of the World Day Against Child Labor?
Well, we ask parents or employers not to exploit children. Children should be given every opportunity to reach their full potential. They should not be exploited. They should be allowed to grow and develop to become productive members of society as adults.
Mr. Mohammed, we want to thank you very much indeed for taking the time. Farouk Mohammed, Labour Inspector 2, thank you very much for taking the time. And as we go, let me give that contact information. If you want to report cases that you suspect may be of cases of child labour, you can contact the Labour Inspectorate Unit, the LIU, at 299-0300-0300, option 3, or 285-5133, option 4. You can email labor.inspector@gov.tt. There's also the 24-hour child line. That's 131 or 800-4321. That's 131 or 800-4321. There's the Children's Authority, of course. Their hotline is 996 or 800-2014. There's OSHA 623-6742 for reports on hazardous work performed by children and minors below the age of 18. The Counter Trafficking Unit is 800-4288 for reports on child trafficking. And also, as far as getting more information on what constitutes child labor beyond what we just heard from Mr. Mohammed, you could go to the website www.labor.gov.tt, and they're on social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. And you can also go, of course, to the global organization's website. That's the ILO, the International Labour Organization, which is an agency of the United Nations. It's www.ilo.org. So I think, Mr. Mohammed, we've covered all the bases. Thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Thank you, Fazeer.
You're more than welcome. As we come up towards the top of the hour, we should have a pretty busy second hour of our morning edition. We'll have a couple of guests in studio with us this morning. One is already here and another should be joining us. And we especially thank our guests for taking the time to come in person as we see a relaxation of our restrictions. And we certainly don't take for granted the efforts of those who would like to join us in studio for a live dialogue, which is always far more dynamic. We certainly do appreciate that. And we'll have a couple of those segments in the second hour. It's 7 o'clock now. It's time now for the news.